In this video, I'm going to talk about why I think the world will change forever due to COVID. Now, I think there's two reasons why the world will never be the same after coronavirus. Now, number one, and I've spoken about this before, unlike number two, which I haven't spoken about before, is that the world was already moving more and more online anyway. So between 2005, especially 2010 and 2020, I mean, let's face it, more and more things were going online. What's the first thing people did last year, never mind this year, is Google. It's going online, it's buying insurance online, or whatever someone wants to buy, plane tickets or whatever, and more industries are moving online. So even industries that weren't being affected in 2005 or 2010, they were being affected in 2017, 18, 19. So that trend was happening anyway. However, the lockdown kind of forced people who weren't really using the internet that much before, some older people and some people in countries that internet penetration wasn't as big, to kind of move more quickly towards that particular way of doing things. And human nature is human nature. Once you're familiar with something, you're less likely to go back. And we've seen that after the lockdowns ended, those people who weren't using the internet that much before the lockdown but got used to it are still using it. But I think a second reason is that if you remember back to 9/11, basically for a few years after 9/11, every time something would happen in a plane, or every time there was an explosion, people were really afraid. They thought, oh well, is this another 9/11? I can remember there was a few times in 2002, 2003, there was like a random explosion which wasn't a terrorist attack, or a plane which lost contact with air passenger control. And it wasn't a terrorist attack, but people were afraid there was going to be as big as 9/11. Now that kind of ended about 5 years later. By about 2006, 2007, there hadn't been any attack which was comparable, probably, in most people's minds. There were many smaller attacks, but by that time, every time a plane kind of lost contact with air passenger control for 1 or 2 minutes, it wasn't newsworthy. Whereas in 2002, 2003, it could actually make the news saying, oh, is this going to be another 9/11? And I think with something like a pandemic, because remember, there's always loads and loads of small pandemics which kill a few hundred people, a couple of thousand. There's countless of them. I think that even once the coronavirus ends, say end of next year or early 2022 or whatever, 2022, 2023, 2024, even maybe 2025, every single time there's like a small outbreak which kills a few people, people are going to be like, oh my God, are we going to lock down again? Is this going to be another coronavirus? And that's going to really affect things like tourism, travel and so on. So even though travel and tourism will probably be affected or recover, should I say, by say 2023 or 2024, remember the trajectory was going up by about 10% per year. So if the coronavirus never happened, bear in mind that from like this year, next year, the year after, the trend was about 10% per year. So even if travel recovers to pre-COVID levels by 2023 or 2024, it wouldn't be as high probably, or it won't be as high as if coronavirus never happened. It might well take 6 to 10 years for travel to actually recover to pre-COVID levels, and also adjusted for what travel would have been if coronavirus never happened. One thing though I do eventually think will recover though, ironically, is pleasure travel. Business travel, I'm not sure if it will ever recover, because we're doing less of this even before the crisis, and now people know they can get 90% of what they could get by using Zoom, or indeed just telephone calls, or using their iPhone to download apps and buy things online. I'm not saying business travel will end. You see it in Europe picking up a little bit, at least before lockdown came back. I do think there will be some business travel in the future, but this aspect will reduce a lot for numerous reasons. You've also got environmental concerns as well. It's just not going to be as big a thing going forward. However, I do think eventually pleasure tourism might well recover fully, in terms of it's something you can't do remotely, even close to as well as in person. It's not like a business meeting. It might make you feel a bit more emotionally connected to someone if you see them across the table, but in reality, you can do it 90% at least as well remotely, and there's extra benefits as well, like it's cheaper, it's better for the environment, it feels less pushy if you're on the consumer side, if you're just having a phone call with somebody or a Zoom or chatting to them on WhatsApp. It's more comfortable to do it in your own home. So it's 90% as good as a face-to-face meeting, but you've got all these benefits. But the same thing can't be said for tourism. Watching something on TV, like watching a show about Barcelona or a safari or whatever it is, it's probably 10% or 20% or 30% of what you can do going to the real place. So I do think tourism might recover, but I don't think business travel will ever recover. And I do think once the pandemic's over, especially for the first 2 or 3 years, maybe even the first 5 years, we're not going to go back to old habits anytime soon.